Thanks for listening to our show. We don't know how it's gonna go, but it's something that you haven't ever seen before. We're two special brothers with rhythm and blessings and love and knowledge and power. All right. So today we're going to talk about relationships.
Necessary in everybody's life. We are social animals. It is episode 3. Did we mention that, B?
I don't believe we did. Episode 3, we are elevating with every single one. Stepping up our game, stepping up the quality of the conversations and the topics, and taking the feedback from our viewers. Again, I'll remind you, we love comments, negative criticism, positive criticism. We want to hear it all.
Let us know.
We're just getting started, and we foresee this going to heights where I wouldn't have imagined in a project with my good friend Russ here. And on that note, good friend, we're going to talk about relationships in the essence of lying on a spectrum. So as with most of the things we talk about on this show, there's balance between things such as good and evil. So relationship on a spectrum, I personally do not feel that I have any enemies, but one end of that spectrum is the enemy type of relationship, the negative, and then one end of that spectrum is your lover, the intense love that you're feeling in a relationship.
100.
And then down from a lover, you have family, friends. Down from that, you have best friend, and then some acquaintances, and then you have people that you're very loosely associated with, or you might not really care about too much. Yeah. And then some people have a lot of folks on the other end of that spectrum that are considered enemies.
100%.
But, I personally do not have enough energy to consider someone as my enemy.
Yeah, and part of us being a healthy, integrated social being is to know how to draw boundaries between each of those levels, so then we don't just give all of our energy in the wrong place. Let me ask you, you don't think you have any enemies out here?
I don't have anyone that I consider to be my enemy.
For sure.
And I try to operate in a way where I can't think of someone that would consider me an enemy. They might stereotype me or group me into something, but me as an individual, I can't think of why somebody would refer to me as being an enemy.
Yeah. Pardon the slight pause. Myla woke up, and now she's part of the show. First podcast guest, Myla Jones. Welcome onto the show.
Myla Mary Jones.
Good job.
First podcast feature ever. First of many. So I'm developing my relationship with this cute little thing. And again, we lie on spectrum. So right now she loves her mama a little bit more than me. But everybody says she'll grow out of that. I'm being patient. But, one thing that I've changed in my perspective of relationships is that, when we were in school age, I felt like everyone was either your friend or your enemy. So I wanted to be friends with everybody because I've always had the idea that I didn't want any enemies. I didn't think it was necessary, but
I feel that.
I didn't realize that friendship could lie on a spectrum the way that I realize now. So, it's okay to have acquaintances, and some people you don't need to label them. Like, that's not the purpose of that relationship, Or really any relationship doesn't need labels, but sometimes it's easier for people to know how to interact with each other when they put a label to it.
Yeah, I feel that. That there are people that feel like they draw a source of inspiration and energy from having enemies or haters. What do you think that is? Like, why do you think that idea exists out there?
So, some things work on like a negative feedback loop, and you think about how we're taught in sports to try harder, almost get belittled sometimes, or,
for sure,
talk crap to you. And I had that kind of mindset for a while until some point in college I would work out, be like, oh, you're too small. Like, you're not strong enough. You're weak. And that would be
Mm-hmm.
what motivated me.
Yeah.
Or, oh, I'm not smart enough. I'm going to read these books because, like, you're not doing well enough, this and that. But now I realize you can have that same effect, but be positive about it. I try to tell people that your motivation should be a positive thing, because what you're doing it should be a positive influence in your life as well.
Mm,
Especially, again, we refer to sports a lot on this podcast. And,
mm.
for the young athlete to have that positive reinforcement and be happy about what you're doing and be confident in your actions and know that you're doing what you're doing because you're putting in that effort, and you're going to continue to increase that effort because you want to be the best, not because you're not good enough.
Yeah. So, and same with me, a lot of times growing up, you get that push like, oh, you're weak, you're small,
Mm-hmm.
things that are supposed to motivate you. And now that I'm older, a lot of people mention toxic masculinity. They
Mm.
talk about how that is making it difficult in the upbringing of young men because they hear words like that. How do you think you were able to break out of that, feeling that you're getting called like a girl or weak or little to motivate you?
It all comes back to that, internal locus of control we talk
Mm,
about, and the self-love and self-confidence, and knowing what you're capable of because you've proven it to yourself, and because you continue to put yourselves in the situations where you give yourself an opportunity to surprise yourself and do more than you thought. Not that we go into situations already thinking we're not capable, and then you don't even try, and you put yourself in a situation where you're not even able to give the effort necessary to possibly triumph.
yeah.
So I've not failed much in my life. And I realized at one point that was doing me a disservice, because
Yeah.
you need failure to
Facts.
understand how to succeed.
Mm,
And the people that we look up to that have all the things that we think resemble success, they've been through a lot of failure. And it's hard for us to see that from our perspective. And a lot of people don't share that part of their journey as well. So
hmm.
I look into me needing to put myself in situations where I'm giving forth my best effort, and then the giving the potential of failure, but not accepting failure. So I don't know what the outcome's going to be. That's not going to deter me from trying it out and trying to succeed. But I realize that I'm not always going to succeed in what I'm trying.
Yeah, I totally understand that. I'm coming from the same place as you. I was always used to winning in my younger years in high school, and then as I got older, I would be on teams where we didn't win as much,
Hmm.
and I had to completely check myself to start understanding how to lose.
Yeah.
And that's one thing, we got to do is learn how to lose. That's
Yeah.
part of being a competitor. Now, I think that a lot of times the reason why people will feel like an enemy is necessary is because of our evolutionary psychology coming from a place or an environment where we may have had scarcity, right? So
Yeah.
we might have not always had all the resources, and we've developed this idea that if I don't go gather as many resources as I can as quickly as possible, then I'm going to be out.
Yeah. And again, it's thinking of it as just good and evil, one
Mm,
and two, rather than being along a spectrum.
yeah,
So you think about the strength of like a gang mentality, right? And
yeah.
having that center nucleus of the people that you trust, that are there for you, and then you feel like everyone else is kind of against you.
Yeah, because you guys feel like as a pack, you can acquire resources.
Yeah, yeah. So you see that in a lot of settings. Like, people get a bad rap of low income areas where there is more gang activity in inner city areas and stuff. But
Mm,
you look in a suburban high school or something, sometimes the sports teams or whatever extracurricular activity, groups of kids do group into gangs like that very often. So if
yeah.
you are in a area where gang activity is more prevalent, that same mindset comes into play. It's just in a different setting. So you really have to promote that unity across any area that you're in, across all ages,
Mm-hmm.
because you get into work settings as well. I work in a hospital, and it seems like between the ICU and orthopedic rehabilitation and like surgical teams, like there's always a little bit of tension when we're trying to make decisions together and
Yeah.
work together to come to the same goal of our patients recovering and getting home. But sometimes egos get into play, and we have different expertise and knowledge between us all, and we have to work in a multidisciplinary fashion.
Mm-hmm.
But the that gang mentality almost comes into play even in
Yeah,
the healthcare setting.
for sure. Yeah, because everyone wants to be the person who made the right move. Everyone wants to be hits the game winner and be the
Right.
person that gets talked about at the end of the day. But there's a lot of value in being able to just share the rock. We talked about last podcast about Steve Nash coming from the Valley of the Sun, two-time MVP from distributing the energy.
Yep.
And since we're talking about relationships, I've found in my life that I'm able to maximize all the relationships I have when I approach it that way. Like, hey, yo, I'm gonna set you up, back cut.
Yeah.
I'm gonna dish it. You know what I mean? I'm
Yeah.
gonna take that approach that if you get open, I'm gonna try to find you, and then we're all gonna win.
Right.
But interesting enough, back to our psychology when we're little, like Myla as a baby, right now, her brain is trying to figure out how much resources she has in her environment, right? If you guys didn't have much, she would be learning right now that I have to grow in scarcity and I have to develop different ways. Now, if you have abundance, her brain responds to that too. I'm in abundance. I can fill
Yes.
up. I can, I don't have to eat so much when it's time to eat because I know later
Oh
on
yeah.
there will be a lot. This is a lot of the reason why poverty and obesity go hand in hand. There's
Yeah.
many variables with that, but when your body knows that food is scarce, it's going to try to just gobble up and
Yeah.
have as many calories as possible.
Yeah, I'm very glad that you brought that up because, we talk about relationships between people, but you also need to have a good relationship with food and what you're putting into your body and having a good relationship with yourself and how you treat your body. So that comes into exercising, going to bed on time, drinking water, and eating half decent foods. But a
Yeah.
lot of people have this toxic relationship with foods. They cope by eating foods that they know are bad for them: high sugar, high fat, fast food. That's not a secret that those things are bad, but so many people, that's the bulk of what they eat. And sometimes they'll have one or two meals in a day, and it's only that bad stuff. I was explaining to someone just earlier today, you might see someone that's shredded and muscular eating bad foods, but you have to realize that that's not all they're eating. Like they
Yeah.
have all these vegetables and supplements often that they're having throughout the day, and then so that one bad meal doesn't impact them as much. But if that fuel is all you have from that bad food, you didn't eat breakfast and then you decide to go to Chick-fil-A after lunchtime and you should have already had two meals today, your body's going to try to operate off of that fatty, greasy meal, and it's going to really just hold you back in so many ways because you're not going to feel good, you're not going to think well, and then ultimately, obviously, you won't look good if that's how you're operating either.
Yeah. You talk about relationships with the body, and you've trained so many people. I'm sure that you've experienced someone who, even though they had a impeccable body figure, they were still a little self-conscious about the way that they looked.
Oh yeah.
How come, like,
Often.
what do you think that is? How come someone can be in, the top 5 percentile of physical, physique, but their mind can have them feeling like their image isn't good enough?
It's a body dysmorphia. I've been there myself.
Okay.
You get so focused on trying to build yourself, and you end up ultimately comparing yourself to other people, especially in a large gym setting where people are all performing at a high level. And then, of course, there's social media where we can see how other people look, but oftentimes people are editing their pictures and whatnot, doing strange things that we're not even aware of as the consumer of that content, and then that is going to alter our ability to see our progress and really have an accurate depiction of our current status. I got in a place for a long time where I lift so hard and I was strong. I didn't feel like I looked strong, and people would tell me I looked strong, but I didn't feel like I looked strong.
Yeah.
And that's hard. That's very hard to rewire, and you really have to change your expectations. Especially with the over media exposure. A lot of people are on illicit drugs to performance enhancing drugs, and a
Yeah.
lot of people don't understand what it looks like when someone's on those things. So they aspire to look a certain way because it's appealing to their eye, but it's really not attainable without making some very dangerous sacrifices and putting things into your body that are not good for your body.
Sure.
And that was interesting for me when I was more heavy into the fitness industry, making workout videos and being more of an influencer. I worked around people that were in the bodybuilding industry and they would take steroids and stuff. And I always found it interesting that people sought those individuals to do something like lose weight because they know what they're doing, but they're clearly using other things to reach those goals. So if you're not planning on doing that method, it was interesting to me that people would choose that individual to meet a certain goal.
Yeah.
I would also see great results with those people because again, those individuals do have the dedication. They put in the time and the nutrition as well on top of those other supplements.
Yeah.
But the picture that they're painting of being able to attain what they have is not always that accurate.
Yeah. I
And
feel that.
I say that very carefully because I know a lot of people that are in the bodybuilding industry that do certain things and have large clientels that I very much respect, and I respect how they carry out their business too. But I've always just found it interesting how quick people are to, rely on somebody like that to help them reach their goals from a normal average person standpoint.
Yeah, I feel that. And like comparison can be the thief of joy. So you can be in that upper echelon and start looking at the pool that you're in and not feeling like you're elite because you're only comparing yourself to an elite pool.
Yeah. And so, that comes back to the self-love and the internal locus of control and realizing that you have the potential to do whatever anybody else is doing if that's your goal.
Yeah.
But, you have to get careful when you're comparing and make sure you're just following the steps to get there. Again, I had another conversation earlier today. A lot of us have the steps to do what we want to do to reach our goals. But the hardest part is following those steps and being consistent and being dedicated and achieving our goals because it's very easy to fall off and get distracted. There's more distractions in this world than there are agonists, I would say, that are working with you to get towards your goal. So you have to be able to block things out and stay focused. And that takes a lot of dedication and conscious effort that the average person isn't able to do on a consistent basis. Yeah. So again, that even plays into your relationships as well, because it's very easy to respond quickly to people and, respond out of emotion rather than logic. And that can be something that can very easily ruin certain relationships, especially in professional relationships. That's something that we haven't talked about yet. Those relationships, in my opinion, need to be a lot different than personal relationships. I've always been one to kind of make excuses on not attending certain extracurricular activities with my coworkers because I like that those relationships are different than my personal relationships.
Yeah.
I do get in situations where I consider a lot of my coworkers to be my friends, but I'm very hesitant to let people into my life on a personal level because I don't want it to affect our professional development and how we perform in the workplace, because I like for everyone to be very focused in the hospital setting, and it 12-hour shifts is hard to be focused. So it's natural to have side conversations and check your phone every once in a while, stuff like that. But I really try to promote excellence in the facility that I work in, and I think that us treating each other as professionals as often as possible is the easiest way for us to achieve that. And like I said earlier, I used to feel like I had to be friends with everyone. And now I realize if I'm friends with everyone, then I won't have time for anyone.
Yeah, I feel that.
So I have to choose my friends wisely and see who's worth my time and
100%.
Have my different relationships across the spectrum, right?
No, Maddie, Myla's part of the show now.
Yeah.
She's the third. She's our third.
She's giving her 2 cents.
Yeah, she has some good perspectives too.
You can take her. Say bye, Myla. Thanks for having me on R&B.
That's true. And, one thing I've learned just going off of what you were just saying is that the more that I've nurtured just being nice to people. I guess they call it networking. The more that I've
Mm,
nurtured, just trying to meet people and
hmm.
just show them that I'm serious about what it is that I'm passionate about,
Yeah.
things have just opened up so much more.
Yeah.
And I've heard this in a million different cliche ways, but the relationships that you have are definitely like your true asset.
Right.
You
Of
know, because
course.
you could fall off. You know, I heard Kanye West talk about this on a Drink Champs interview. He was
Mm,
saying that like he could be broke, but he could go anywhere in the world and have lodging, get food and
yeah.
clothes. And, you know, he has infinite resources because of
Hmm.
the relationships that he has. And that's what I'm trying to develop is that type of vibe.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting having conversations with homeless people because
Mm,
I've always been so grateful for what I have, and also thought like, man, I would have to make some big mistakes to like end up on the street because I do have relationships with people that they know that I would do anything in my power to make sure they weren't in that situation, and
yeah.
I believe that they would do the same for me. Again, along the spectrum, from my wife to her family to my parents and my family to you
Mm-hmm.
and some of our other friends. Like, I know, on top of God, all these people got me too. So,
Mm,
it does make me sad to see people that clearly don't have that strong enough connection with other resourceful people,
yeah.
and then they get into those tough situations. But yeah, I also try to develop strong relationships with people that have the same values and morals as me, that
Yeah.
are financially responsible, and try to excel professionally and
Mm-hmm.
personally. And a lot of things go into play when you end up like that. Mental health,
Yeah.
there's a lot of unfortunate things that can happen. Some people that go through the hospital system come out not having anything because of medical bills too, so
Mm-hmm.
you never know. But again, it is important to build up your relationships and your circle as strong as you want to build up your body and build up your mind. Like, putting effort into all of those things is really important to be what we in Western society consider to be successful. Because we talked on one of our previous conversations about being the lone wolf, and
Mm,
people like to say that it's lonely at the top, but I like to say it doesn't have to be. And
yeah.
when I make it to the top, I don't plan for it to be lonely. I got a lot of people I plan on bringing with me. So
Yeah.
again, you change your perspective and see how you want to operate. But I know that the reaching my goals has been a lot easier when I have as many strong players in my corner as possible, trying to motivate me and also be a resource to me, not only when I ask them to be, but they volunteer to do so because I do that for them as well.
For sure. In my opinion, I don't even think I could get to the top by myself. Let me ask you. So, you know, a lot of people our age and younger than us identify as having social anxiety.
Hmm.
And do you know any ways off the top of your head that someone can try to work through that social anxiety?
It that really just stems from being worried about what other people think of you.
Mm-hmm.
So if
I
you have
agree.
a positive image of yourself
Mm-hmm.
and you love yourself
Yeah.
and you have self-confidence, really the social anxiety isn't a possible factor.
Mm.
And understanding that we're all connected and nobody's perfect, and not assuming that someone's judging you for your differences, because we have interactions with people that are different from us in certain ways, and
Yeah.
often they project and let us know that they don't necessarily approve of us,
Mm.
but not everybody that fits that individual's demographic feels the same way. So we have to give everyone more of an individualized experience with us, and not let past trauma or interactions change how we uh, believe an individual is going to interact with us. And again,
For
we talk
sure.
about mirroring energy. So if you give
Mm.
somebody positive energy, instead of assuming that they're going to judge you for how you're acting,
Yeah.
maybe assume that they're going to reflect that positive energy.
For sure.
Some people will make it very evident that they don't want to talk to you, or they don't appreciate your presence. But me in the hospital setting, sometimes family members don't really want you there, but it's like, I'm doing my job, I have to be here, I'm
Mm-hmm.
sorry. But
Yeah.
I just am confident in my actions in any situation. If I show somebody gratitude, or hold a door for someone and they don't say thank you, or I don't take that to heart. I've seen people get really upset about not getting a thank you from holding the door open. And my argument is maybe you shouldn't hold open the door if you need
Yeah,
that thank you that
for
bad, you know?
throw it at them if that's what you need.
Right.
Like,
Like
come
that's
on.
the same energy that you're putting off getting angry after the fact. So
Yeah, I agree. Like, if you can take out of your mind that you need recognition for what it is that you've done, I think that you can expand so much more in this world. And how you're recognized isn't really up to you. This is another reason why I think that my belief is like my ultimate anxiety medication.
yeah.
My belief in God is my ultimate anxiety medication, because I don't have to think about what rewards I'm going to get for my actions. That's not up to me. You know, the
Right.
way I'm rewarded, well, that's God's decision.
Yeah, that's a great point to make because we spend our lives or a
That's Kendrick
large
Lamar, by the way. That was his bar. But
yep,
yeah,
yep,
go
yep,
ahead.
yep,
Where do
yep.
we spend our life?
You know, at least the early portion of our lives up until we're out of high school, basically, a lot of what we do revolves around us being rewarded afterwards, right?
Yeah.
We get trophies in sports, we get accolades in school, and then, you know, you graduate, you get a diploma, and graduate college, get a diploma, your piece of paper.
Yeah.
And so when we start doing things later in life where you're not necessarily getting a physical reward or somebody's not verifying your action and letting you know that you did a good job,
Yeah.
sometimes it's hard to recognize our accomplishments. And we have
Yep.
to remind ourselves that we're still doing great and you're moving forward, making progress, you're accomplishing things. You have to have your own reward system. Some people reward themselves with going on trips or buying something. But, you know, I reward myself by keep moving forward.
That's
I
huge.
keep compounding on whatever progress I make because the reward should be being a step closer to your goal.
For
But
sure.
sometimes we do need tangible things to have that reinforcement or, you know, even continue the motivation. Because if you're just going along the journey, along the process and not seeing anything given back to you, you often get discouraged and don't want to keep putting forth the effort.
For sure. And I think that, you know, the people talk about becoming aware. And I think that the first step of awareness is to understand that you have been conditioned in your upbringing. It's impossible not to be conditioned.
Yeah.
It's the way that we go. But you reach a certain age where you reckon with your conditioning, and for myself, try to deconstruct that conditioning. So it's
Yeah.
like, okay, I don't need the good job, Russ. I don't need those pats on the back
Yeah.
because that was part of my previous conditioning that
Yeah.
made me behave. Now I consciously create my own life.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. That's another great point. Everything that we do needs to be developing and changing as we go on. You know, our beliefs should change. Our perspective needs to change. Our priorities should change. Change is part of progress, and change is often painful or difficult in a way. And so people don't really like change. And some people are so comfortable in what they're doing, they don't ever want it to change. But that's not realistic. So if you keep fighting to keep things the same, you're just going to get left behind while everyone else is changing and growing around you.
For sure. And you don't even know how big you're supposed to be. You know what I mean? You could be destined to expand past anything that someone has before and break into a whole new frontier of like consciousness. This is what I be thinking. I'm like, you know, if I have these restrictions on myself because of what I think about the world, maybe my soul isn't going to be what it could be. I wrestle with that thought a lot though, because like, is that even possible for me to get in the way of what I'm supposed to be? I don't know. I think about that.
Boy, is that possible. I
Yeah.
think that is often what is stopping someone
True.
from being what they're supposed to be. Nothing's holding you back except yourself, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Internal locus of control.
Yeah.
So I have to believe that I can do these things. And if I don't do it, that's on me.
Yeah. Yeah, because you have free will. This is
have
the
free will.
argument of free will, because it's like I'm supposed to be something amazing, but God gave me the ability to possibly diminish that.
Yeah. You know, some people want to be rich and famous. So it's like, what are you doing to be famous? What are you doing to get rich? You're not going to sit here on the couch, watch other people do that and accomplish it. Some people want to have a successful business. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, you're not even educating yourself on what it takes to run a business.
For real,
you
yeah.
know? So you have to have knowledge to create the opportunities, and God gives you the tools, but he's not going to build the house for you, right?
Yeah, 100.
You got to gather the materials and put in the work. But Some people sit there and pray for the things that they want and not even put in the effort on a daily basis and think that it's just going to pop up out of nowhere. That's not how God answers our prayers.
Nope, you got to work, and that goes into your relationship with this environment, right? Your relationship with how things are supposed to work. Yeah, because I've had people try to combat my own belief system by telling me like, "Oh, I was praying and that didn't work," and it's like you got to work harder than your prayers. You got to meet God.
Yeah,
where you want to be.
You know, I want to backtrack to you talking about conditioning on the topic of relationships. You know, conditioning is very significant in a child's development. But, you know, later in life, I see a lot of people that have had similar conditioning, but are in two completely different places as adults. So, you know, that conversation comes up to what's the difference? Like, how did this person end up still accomplishing their goals and this person was never able to break away from their trauma? But you have to use that conditioning in a way that's going to allow you to grow, because again, growth is sometimes painful. And those negative interactions that you go through, you can't use that as an excuse to continuing to have bad relationships throughout your life. A lot of people want to say, well, you know, I didn't have this relationship with my father or my mother, or this happened when I was a kid. You have to look at that, accept it, acknowledge it, but use it to build upon. You can't keep holding on to that and letting it hold you back from being able to have a healthy relationship, because you've seen what a bad relationship looks like.
For sure.
A lot of people like to say, I haven't seen what a good relationship looks like, so I don't know how to operate in it. But if you know what a bad relationship looks like, then the least you can do is not do that.
Yeah.
Right.
I know how to not talk to somebody. I know how to not treat somebody. Yeah.
So, you know, I get a little frustrated sometimes when people use that as an excuse for them doing wrong towards people. Oh, I was conditioned this way. Oh, my parents did this. It's like, well, you know how that made you feel.
Yeah, man.
So why would you continue to do that to someone else?
For sure. I work with a kid right now that every time he has a fit and gets super frustrated, he'll tell me that his mom has anger issues. I'll be talking with him. He's like, my mom has anger issues. So,
and that's tough.
And I'm like, what are you going to say?
I was going to say, you know, it's a little different when you are a kid. I meant more so, you know, later in life after you've gone through these experiences and stuff. But when you're a kid trying to figure it out, and
for sure,
your role model or the adult you're at least spending the most time with is having those negative responses to things.
And labeling it anger issues and telling you that this is part of our makeup. Yeah. We have anger issues baked into us.
Not, oh, I don't know how to cope properly.
For sure. You know? Or I don't know how to like kind of take a step back and analyze for a second. Like all these tools that could actually break that cycle. And I have that conversation so much about breaking a cycle. Yeah. Because it's like, okay, we can sit here and talk about what our dad and grandparents and their grandparents and all these things happen, but you're here now. And are you going to take the responsibility to break your cycle and hand off to your next generation a more healthy way of living?
Right, because being caught in a cycle, again, can be an excuse for not doing things how you know they should be. I think we should all be looking to break a cycle.
I think so.
Nothing's perfect, right? So there's always improvements to be made, progress to be made, and that comes with effort and acknowledgement of the things that need to be improved. I had a great childhood. I loved school. I loved everything about being a kid and growing up. I know a lot of people that are like, oh, middle school was awful or high school was rough. Like, and that hurts me. Like, I feel for those people because I loved all the stages of life I've been through so far. You know?
Me too.
And it's tough sometimes. I remember the first couple years after college, Maddie would be like, man, I miss college. And it's like, well, yeah, college was cool, but I don't really miss it. And she's like, really? You don't miss this and that? I was like, no, it was good while I had it. But like, I'm excited to be at this next stage of life.
For sure.
You know, you talk about relationships along the spectrum. Relationship change along with age, and we should change along with age. And people that I work with in the hospital are often elderly, and so many elderly people tell me like, don't get old. What's the alternative? Dying young?
Like,
I want to get old.
I hear that a lot too. Don't get old.
Yeah, I try to tell them, I'm like, look, I know this is a tough situation you're in, but like you've accomplished a lot. Like is a blessing, and I hope to, you know, get as far in life as you have. And
for sure. And I
Yep.
feel like I have an old soul already. So it's
Right.
funny because for me, it's like, yo, I'm just waiting.
Yeah,
I'm just kind of
yeah.
waiting for my body to catch up to my soul.
Right, right.
I'm
I
down with
feel it.
chilling in a more like relaxed vibration,
Yeah.
with just more wisdom.
Yeah, yeah. And that's one thing, you talk about perspective and how you portray.
Mm-hmm.
I think on like our first conversation, we can have the same type of conversation, but with a very low external energy. Like if somebody's looking from the outside, they
Yeah.
might get kind of bored or something
Yeah.
just
Like all
because
these
like
dudes are just
we're
very,
we're just
yeah.
connecting on this intellectual level where I don't have to get too excited or show you enthusiasm because we
Mm-hmm.
understand the power in the words that we're sharing and we're
Yep.
thinking with each other.
Mm-hmm.
But I've thought about that, and a lot of people can't absorb information in that same way or stay interested or realize the value of something without the enthusiasm, because
Yeah.
enthusiasm goes hand in hand with love and joy.
For
So I
sure.
understand that, but
Yeah, I do too.
some of these conversations that we have, they're not always joyful, right?
Sure.
So you gotta switch up the tone and the pace a little bit, but even if we're having a joyful conversation, sometimes me and you just sitting here like, yeah, like
Uh-huh.
bouncing back and forth, like almost serious, but it's not that serious. It just looked like it from the outside because that's the type of relationship we have,
Yeah, for sure.
Uh,
Because
I,
this is what we would be doing anyway, just kind
right,
of trying to
right.
break down these facets of life.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's funny too. You talk about relationships and labels. Like
Mm-hmm.
I often say that you're my best friend, but I know that you have friends that you might also think that they're your best friend. And I
Mm-hmm.
used to think like you have to have one best friend. Like, oh,
Yeah.
they're not my best friend. And like, who's my best friend? Like, are we best friends? Like, do we need to be on the same page? But you can label people and things however you want,
Yeah, you
right?
really can. Mm-hmm.
Again, I said labels kind of help change how you interact with people, but I treat all my friends the same. Like,
Yeah.
I show them love. I try to have meaningful conversations and grow with them. I try to let my friends know that I'm here for them if they need something.
Mm-hmm.
And then, my best friend might get to come over and hang out with the baby a little more often than
100%.
everybody else or something like that.
I feel it.
But
And I'm sure from being in those dark moments with people, there's times where I'm working with someone and I feel such a primal level because I'm like, yo, we're almost at the lowest that we can be right now as far as
yeah,
like your pride and your ego. It just got shattered because of what just happened. And now it's
yeah,
just me and you in this room having a conversation.
yeah.
And sometimes I feel like that energy is like a place I'm supposed to be.
Hmm.
Sometimes I feel like I'm meant to just go into that just mud with somebody who just had their whole ego and perspective of themselves shattered,
Yeah,
and they're looking around like, who am I? And then
yeah,
I'm sitting there like, same, bro. Like, like I
yeah.
ask these questions a lot.
Yeah, no, it's funny you say that
Hmm.
because I go through crazy situations at the hospital where afterwards I'm like, what the hell was that? And
Hmm.
then luckily I can reflect on those situations with my coworkers, but it does go into a primal state sometimes where we're all on autopilot, like
Mm.
starting IVs, getting medications in, like intubating the patient, like stopping bleeding, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then, the tensions get high. And even just 2 nights ago, I had to remind this girl, she got pretty frustrated towards the end of the night because we all had a rough night. It was just tough as a unit. Then, end of the night, she's trying to clean up. We got like 10 minutes left of our shift. And she's like, will you help me turn my patient? And I'm looking at this dude like, oh, I don't have a good feeling about this. Like, I feel like if we touch him, like something's going to happen. Like he has
Yeah.
the CRT machine going, which is a renal replacement. So it's basically doing the work that your kidneys would do, filtering the toxins from your body and pulling off some fluid. And then he's on medications, controlling his blood pressure, all this stuff. But there's like blood on his sheet. So she's like, I don't
Mm.
want to hand off to the next shift without like cleaning this up. I'm like, all right. So I told her to be prepared. And then we turn the dude. He starts coughing up blood into his endotracheal tube and the
Dang.
ventilator. He's like spazzing out, shaking. And it was like an awful situation in
Yeah.
general, but especially like the end year shift on. And she was already like kind of tearful because she felt like there was a lot of pressure from the doctors expecting her to get things accomplished. And then
Mm.
so we handled that situation. And then I stayed around for a few minutes to let her know, one, she did a good job. I don't think healthcare providers hear that nearly enough because
Yeah.
we do amazing things and don't hear, hey, you did a good job. Like nobody takes a second to just look you in your eye and tell you that. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's really rewarding
Mm.
because we'll do a good job sometimes and the patient doesn't survive. And then you think like you failed. But you
Man.
need somebody to let you know that you still did a good job.
For sure. Variables outside of your control were at work. Like
Yeah,
it
yeah.
wasn't you.
But the big thing for her, I had to remind her, you know, she felt all this pressure from the doctor. She felt like she had let people down, this and that. I told her it's a 24-hour job. You just put in 12 hours of work. We can't accomplish everything, you know. And even you showing this emotion, it shows that you cares. But you got to keep it under control because people might be popping off on you and stuff, but you need to realize how good of a job you did.
Yeah.
And also realize they don't see the work that we're putting in that full 12 hours. They're popping in and out. They're putting in orders from another room sometimes. They'll be in there with us doing procedures. But there's a lot of one-on-one struggling that we go through with our patients that, you know, to be a successful nurse and continue to grow and keep your sanity, you got to be able to tell yourself that you did a good job and have that self-love and that good relationship with yourself.
For real. And, you know, as you're saying this, I'm thinking like that is how PTSD can be developed because you saw something that was abnormal. So already your brain is recording it in a different place. And then you felt like your actions weren't enough to save the situation.
Right.
You pair those things without getting told that, hey, you did exactly what you were supposed to do.
Yeah.
If you don't get told that, you could need to go to therapy to end up figuring out that you did as much as you can. That happens. I mean, I'm not trying to like trigger anyone out there, but just working with people with PTSD, a lot of times it's the narrative that they're telling themselves about the situation. So when they go into therapy, all of them and their therapist is working on is changing the narrative about what happened.
Yep. And trying to process it.
Right. Because obviously, you know, we go through just quick psychology. We go through life all day and we're perceiving and processing a billion different things. Most of it is just on our normal scales. So it goes in and out.
Subconsciously.
Right. But when we have an event that is like crazy, like the other day I was driving and I saw a car hit a truck and like flip over. That type of stuff that's abnormal is going to register in a different place.
Yeah.
Now, if my emotions are also tied into that and something I did is tied into that, that's the easiest way to develop it. PTSD.
Yeah. And sometimes you're in situations like that where you feel like you're even at fault. Like, oh, I did something. Like, did I make that happen? Like, whoa, especially when it's really quick and you don't even really know what happened. And that's difficult for people to cope with, especially if it ends up being like a fatal situation.
Yeah.
You know, we could talk about the Damar Hamlin deal with the dude collapsing on the field. Like, I tell people, seeing situations in a hospital setting is a lot different than seeing them out in the regular world.
Yeah.
Like, the hospital's not a controlled setting. I was doing an interview once and the lady didn't like that I used the word controlled because there is like chaos in the hospital. I was like, all right, whatever. But we have a team there. We're prepared to deal with, you know, critical, emergent situations. Like, we're monitoring people, kind of expecting something to happen eventually, right? But you're playing a football game or something, you have your guard down, you're supposed to be relaxing, being entertained, enjoying, and something crazy like that happens. That's like a way different experience. Even for the first responders out there, you know, they don't have those things happen every week. So
for sure,
like, that's high adrenaline. You gotta be able to perform, and they practice those situations, but even practicing those situations is not the same as doing them.
100%.
In the ICU setting, we do mock codes very often. It's nothing like actually pressing on somebody's body and being responsible for reviving someone.
Totally understand
the amount
that.
of emotion that goes behind it, and just how quickly you have to think, and not being able to, you know, have that second check always. Like, things are flying by.
For sure.
So again, with perspective and then having those relationships with people that you trust, I always try to have very trusting relationships with my coworkers so that we can perform in those situations better, and they can rely on me to perform and I can rely on them. And then that takes away from the stress because I know that he's going to do his job, right? Because even in a team setting, you know, you think about football, the running back's running the ball. He doesn't think his linemen are going to block for him. He's never going to be able to perform to the best of his abilities because he's paranoid.
Yeah, true.
But when you have faith in your team and the people that you're working with, and you know that they're going to do what they're supposed to do, and then you know that you have the ability, because you have that self-love and that confidence, and you've been putting in the work, and you are here ready to perform. That's how you do amazing things as a group.
Yeah, and from my experience, that's when I started to have fun, is when I was able
Yeah.
to do that, man. If you can buy into the role and do your best, that's when you're going to really start to have fun with some people around you. That's
Yeah.
a dope experience. And then the opposite side of that, when no one's bought in and everyone wants to be the man,
Yeah.
it could be the most miserable season of your life.
Yeah.
But it's funny because you're talking about relationships. I'm thinking about my relationship with the content that I intake, because we were talking about PTSD, and like there's been times where I've been on social media and someone sends me something or I click on something and I'm watching someone get stomped out or choked or shot right here on my phone, and I'm like, I didn't train for this, bro. Like who
Yeah.
thinks that for some reason I'm supposed to be able to just download this
Yeah.
information into my soul?
Yeah.
And this is a big reason why I have to take a whole bunch of breaks, because of really just how traumatic things are. And I can see how the content on these social media apps are trying to desensitize me.
Yeah.
But since I do take breaks, like it hurts when it does enter. Like I feel
Yeah.
like I'm being hurt.
Yeah.
And then, so I'll just give a prime example. Watching like the George Floyd video,
Yeah.
I remember a few months after that, like just having a very normal interaction with like a police officer, and that video kind of flashed back in my mind. And it's like, I don't have anything against this man who's the police officer, but I was like, whoa, this is really the collective trauma playing out in my mind, because I watched this same uniform kneel on the black dude's neck, and now I'm feeling myself in this situation.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dang. And I be overthinking the psychology of things. So I can only imagine how somebody who's not as aware of this process and watches these videos all the time, how they feel in these moments.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up, because you should have a healthy relationship with social media too.
Which is
so
hard
much,
to do.
Oh yeah, it's very hard, because so much of what we see is not what we're trying to see when we go on social media. It's so easy to get down this rabbit hole, or somebody send you something, or something just pops up. Like that happens all the time. And again, link it back to the trauma. I've been pulled over with you before.
Yeah.
I already had that level of anxiety anytime I got pulled over, and I've never had an aggressive situation with a police officer or anything. But definitely after seeing something like that, even more so, like I don't even have to be talking to the police officer. I'm gonna be 100% honest right now, bro. We have security guards at the hospital. I don't like when they're around. I don't feel safe when the security guards are around.
Yeah.
You know, because it just looks the same. And
Yeah,
they'll
I
be
feel
walking
you.
down the hall. They say hi to me. Sometimes I don't say hi back. I'm not gonna
Yeah, bro.
lie, because like
I
I don't feel
understand.
comfortable with them.
Yeah.
And it just because I'm in scrubs and you're a hospital security guard, like that relationship between a black man and a police officer still is in here, and I feel it, even though I don't want to. And I have a lot of police officer friends, and you know, thankfully I do, because I understand the differences between people, and I don't generalize any group of people ever.
Same.
But you know, if it's not my friend sitting there in the uniform, then I kind of expect the other option, right?
For sure.
You talk about the spectrum of relationships. What I assume is that a lot of police officers consider me on further on the negative end of that spectrum, just because of how they're conditioned and how they've been trained. And then also how I've been conditioned because of media and situations that people that I love have been in.
Yeah, and pause for a second. If you're listening to this and you have like the ideology that is completely opposite of this, and you get upset because people might talk about the police in an unfavorable way, like he just said, we don't categorize anybody. This is just a conversation about what young black people can feel just because of the content that they've downloaded throughout their life.
Yeah.
And this is why we have to be more aware and intentional with what we teach ourselves about these, you know, groups.
Yeah.
Because like we're saying, if we're going to have 100% internal locus of control, then we can't think that we're a victim in any way, right? We got to remove that, which can be hard to do.
Right.
But to remove those images that have been downloaded with these symbols of the badge, and knowing that power corrupts, and having this conversation with a stranger, it can be hard, man.
Yeah. And again, we don't generalize, and I have friends that are cops, and I just want to, you know, anybody that has power, it can be used in a negative manner.
For sure.
Power goes to people's heads in various situations. I've seen very bad sports teams coaches that have power over these kids, and then they end up being aggressive, saying unnecessary
Oh
things,
man.
and even to their parents, because they feel like they're on their high horse just because they have the label of a coach.
Yes.
So, when we have these conversations, you got to be able to take yourself out of the details and just see the overall concept that we're looking at.
For sure.
And then the level of conditioning that goes into any experience we go through, especially as children, or that we see on a regular basis through social media, is going to ultimately change how we perceive other people and how we interact with them, and preconceived notions that we may have.
Yeah.
I interact with everybody with the same amount of respect, and that hasn't changed in any way since me being exposed to these types of police brutality situations and
Yeah.
stuff.
Same.
Maybe there's a little bit of fear in the back of my mind now, but I've always been respectful to cops.
100%.
And I expect to continue to do so, and especially if they do the right thing themselves. But I also stand up for what's right, and I differentiate between those things. And if my brother Russ here was doing something that I thought was inappropriate or unnecessary, I would check him quick.
Yeah, which you have.
And you're right.
For sure.
And you've done the same for me, and that's
100.
very important for having strong, meaningful relationships that you carry on a long time too, knowing that you have people that are going to support you in a way where you're going to do what's right and make good decisions for yourself as well.
Yeah.
Because not everyone has the opportunity to really handpick a group of people that are going to think of each other in that way.
Yeah.
Or realize that you can operate out of a place of love and continuously make good decisions,
For sure.
Yeah.
No, I understand that. Last episode, I was talking a little bit about, I addressed like the parents of young athletes, and I was saying that you need to only acknowledge or recognize and reward when your young athlete is being a good sport.
Yeah.
It's funny because as I listen back to it, I was really only talking about like young, like 11 years old and down.
Okay.
And the reason is because I spend a lot of time in tournaments and basketball games and sporting events, and I am seeing these young athletes more and more taunt and just be bad sports, and their parents are like rowling it up, like, good job, like taunt the kid and do all these things. And I'm sitting there thinking like, man, this is going to be so difficult for you as you start getting older and trying to play the real game.
Yeah.
And the actual consequences come.
Right.
You have been socialized improperly, and I think that that's because of social media.
Oh, yeah.
This new school of sports is so weird because there's so much content about like I score, and I spend more time talking trash than I did even playing. It's entertaining. I've seen it at like Venice Beach. I'll go to Venice Beach, and there will be a crowd of people watching the game, not because the hoopers are nice, but because every move they do, they talk big crap. And people love it, but it's not true sport.
Right.
And it's funny because I'm like, I want to be able to like go tell these parents, like, dude, your kid isn't doing better by being like a little jerk. Like, he needs to learn the game.
Yeah, that's a great point to make, and I'm glad that you specified with the age, because that makes a big difference
For sure.
between being under the age of 12 versus being like a high school athlete. And I've been seeing that as well, and I'm trying to understand it more as I'm interacting with these kids, because sports are a lot different because of social media. And I feel that I'm able to say this because people are letting their kids act like this. A lot of those kids that are doing that stuff are not good.
Exactly.
They're not good at the sport.
Exactly.
And you shouldn't act like that even if you are good, but you look crazy letting your kids do that and like promoting that energy in a kid that's not even really producing.
It looks crazy. And it's funny because I when I see it, I just know like, wow, it's not going to hit you guys until recruiting starts and a bunch of coaches turn the other way.
Yeah.
That's when it's going to hit you, but that might be a delayed consequence for years.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm just like, man.
That's why you got to address it early on
For
and
sure.
teach them what's important.
Yep.
And, there's nothing wrong with celebrating. I came from a high school football program where we weren't allowed to celebrate at all. So, my mine is a little different in terms of that, but I always wanted to celebrate, and I understand that it's important to be able to celebrate with your team, and that positive energy is going to help you to continue to perform and want to achieve that level of success, but it
Yeah.
has to have balance behind it,
For
right?
sure. Don't belittle your opponent, because
Right.
ultimately, think about it. There is no game without your opponent.
Right.
Why would you belittle and make them seem like they're worthless? You wouldn't even be able to play if they weren't there.
Right. And if they weren't any type of good, then you have nothing to celebrate about anyway. Like, why
100%.
are you going to be the number one in the nation bragging and jumping around dancing because you beat the ranked 100,000th team in the nation?
For sure. And
Like,
this is how I know I'm becoming an old head, because I find myself so many times scratching my head and saying, what part of the game is this? I'm like, what part of the game is this? Like,
This isn't in the rule
like, yeah,
book.
like what part of the game is this? But I'm like, oh, this is something that
Yeah.
spawned from these social media sites.
Yeah, no, because it wasn't part of the game back
Nah.
when we were in it. Yeah,
Bro.
I'm glad you brought that up because I thought I was the only one for a little bit. I'm over here like, what are these kids doing?
Yeah,
man?
for
That's
real.
like half of the game, them
Man,
dancing around.
It's crazy, bro.
And then in a situation like basketball, dudes be getting punked. Like you get dunked on the other end because you over here celebrating
Yeah,
and
it's-
didn't get back on defense.
For sure, it's nuts. But yeah, man, the relationship with all these things, I hope when people hear us talking about some of those more difficult topics like police brutality and what it does to the psyche, I hope they hear us out, because I feel like it's easy to watch two young black men and just automatically assume that we have this like liberal leftist ideology that they hear echoed all the time. But you should hear us out, because I feel like you get kind of, inspired, and it would spark curiosity just kind of hearing what our true beliefs are. And you shouldn't assume that you know somebody. That's something that I've had to deal with a lot. It's like people look at me and automatically assume where my beliefs lie.
Yeah.
That's one of the most annoying things to me, even though like I'm trying to step back and just not take things personal. I'm like, dude, you can't look at me and assume what I believe, because I might just completely just blow your mind
Most
going
likely
the other
will.
way. Yeah.
Right.
For sure.
But yeah, anybody that's watching this show needs to realize that no matter what we're talking about, it's coming from a place of love, right? We're going to have difficult conversations on here. We'll talk about death. We'll talk about police brutality, talk about war. We don't have to agree. You and I don't have to agree. We sometimes don't agree. I don't want y'all to think we're over here ganging up on any ideals, but a lot of things we do agree with because we have values, we have morals, and those are things that we've developed along the years, and we've seen each other develop these things. But I'll tell you, earlier in life, we had things that we disagreed on that, now we have kind of picked out the positives, and because we're moving in a similar direction as far as how we want to grow our consciousness and interact with the world around us, we do agree on a lot of things, and we try to come from a logical scientific perspective before we put our emotion into it. So I encourage you all to do the same, especially when you're engaging with us, because I think that it would be beneficial for you and how you interact.
So what I'm wondering is, since we're talking about relationships, how important do you think it is for a young black man and their relationship with their father? Like, what do you think it means to us? Is there some type of deeper meaning? Can we feel healthy and integrated without that relationship?
I hope so, because a lot of people have to, right?
Yeah, you do have to.
So,
And that's one thing
it's hard for me to speak on it because I was blessed enough to have my dad around, and I'm blessed enough to still have him around. So I know a lot of people who didn't.
For sure.
I think that my learning process was a little bit easier than theirs, just because I didn't have to figure out so many things on my own. There's a lot of single moms out there who I have so much respect for, because I had to watch my daughter for like 6 hours today, and it was difficult. I don't know how y'all do it, single moms. So shout out to you.
Shout out to you.
The utmost respect forever and ever. But, between a young black man and his father, the father's supposed to show him how to provide, how to work hard, and how to show love. And oftentimes, even when the father is present, that's not necessarily what's going on either, right?
For sure.
So it could be one of two ways with how it affects a child, because some people might be better off without that negative influence in their life.
For real.
But a good father is gonna provide those opportunities to learn, and maybe save some stress and learning hard lessons, getting arrested, getting in fights, stealing, doing things that are morally wrong. Just having a role model there to set the precedent and explain to you how the world works is very beneficial. And some people don't know how anyone makes money other than stealing and rapping, or things that are kind of cliche for negative energy. I'm not trying to
Yeah.
say rapping's negative energy, but I think y'all know what I mean there.
Yeah, for sure. Like they think it's the only route to their class
Yeah,
mobility.
they don't see how broad their opportunities are,
For sure.
or how much they control that they have over themselves and their actions and the potential that they have, because they only see one narrow perspective of life.
Yeah, and yeah, that is the goal, is to be able to say like, hey, there's more resources in these fields rather than just entertainment, sports and
Right.
entertainment. And it's funny because you take that into an evolutionary psychologist perspective, and it's going to be like if we were to go back to when people were in tribes and they needed courageous individuals to go out a little further from their known area to gather food and certain stuff and bring it back.
Mm-hmm.
If we thought that there's only food in one spot, then we're going to teach our young go to that one spot.
Right.
Now, if we live somewhere like Egypt next to the Nile River in the Fertile Crescent, then we're going to know that we live in abundance. And we're going to be like, you don't need to go that way to eat. You can go 360 degrees
Right.
to eat. And that distinction really matters when you talk about a culture and how somebody is integrated into the world.
Yeah.
We were talking about Myla and her, resources and her brain growing, but as a group, people grew to know what was around them. And if you want to get into history and you talk about like, well, Black History Month is coming up in February, we know from history that these areas, like I was just saying, Egypt, the Nile River, we know that this was very fertile area.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of those people that were in those areas were used to abundance,
Mm-hmm.
and then they met up with the Europeans
Mm-hmm.
who had shortly before that come out of the dark ages where they were not living in abundance. Those are two totally different mindsets that almost like can't really understand each other converging, which I think is really interesting when you just want to talk about the history and like these two cultures integrating.
Yeah.
Now that I hope we're able to get past everything that's happened. And once we do, I think we should really start to think about how those were two autonomous cultures that came together.
And a lot of times when cultures come together like that, it starts as conflict because a lack of understanding, not being able to communicate with each other, and ultimately a lack of love, because just like I said, a lack of understanding. We love things that we understand. We're fearful of those that we don't. So it's very important to, again, understand different perspectives, see how worlds can collide, but also see what beauty can come from different people working together.
Yeah, for sure.
As far as I want to touch on your professional relationships.
Yeah, man.
So you have children that you work with very often.
Yes, sir.
And then how do you feel your interactions with your coworkers affect the kids? Like, do you think that it's important for you to have strong relationships with your coworkers so that the kids you work with can have the best experience possible?
Yes, it's especially important for me to show that I have complete trust and faith in the people that they're working with. Because like kids in the home or kids anywhere, if they feel like they can split you two and get an answer over here that they want to get over here, they're going to try.
Right.
And they know me from working there for so long. They know that I'm consistent, but sometimes I might have a new staff I'm training or someone I'm working with in a difficult situation, and they're going to get tested.
Yeah. Right.
So ultimately for me, one, I love all my coworkers because they're interested in that field of social work or psychology or teaching, and they all have like great things to talk about. But yes, kids watch, man, and I'm ultimately trying to teach social skills.
Yeah.
So when I'm having a conversation, I'm always thinking that there's eyes on me.
Yeah.
So I'm upright, I'm eye contact, I'm all the things I'm trying to teach passively to them. So
and real quick, I want people to understand that feeling like eyes are on you, that's not like a paranoia or
Mm-mm.
self-consciousness. That's just being prepared to perform,
For
right?
sure.
Because it's different than being in a room by yourself, slouching around, doing whatever.
For
Like if you're
sure.
around people, the energy that you put out to them, you elevate the situation. So
Yeah.
again, you
And,
can go
and I
ahead.
and I could talk my little trash for a second. Like I'm 6'3", 225 pounds. Like I command presence in a room. I know
Yeah.
this.
Uh-huh.
And then I'm also leading these kids in this group. So it's like
Yeah.
there's just always wandering eyes. So I'm always aware of like the fact that I need to be, in the best communication that I can be.
Yeah. And for me, 5'8", 200. Uh, when I leave the house, I know I look different than a lot of the people around me. I draw
For
a little
sure.
more attention. So I
Yep.
carry myself in a certain way. And people often will comment on how I carry myself, think I'm
Mm-hmm.
older than I am, or comment on my confidence, or think that I've been in my industry longer than I have because of how I present my thoughts and interact with my coworkers and the patients and their families, just
Mm-hmm.
because I too take pride in having a high social intelligence, and I expect that of the people around me too.
Yeah.
I was making a comment the other day. A doctor kind of blew up on a nurse, and she was really hurt about it. And I let her know, some of these doctors have really, really high IQs, but for whatever reason, they don't often have the social intelligence or
Mm-hmm.
the empathy to slow down and react to people in a certain way, because they are expecting everyone to perform at a high level, but they're not necessarily promoting it in a positive way.
For sure.
It's kind of like stress and you feel under pressure.
Yeah.
I let her know, like, what he said to you, that was inappropriate. You just got to
Mm-hmm.
know that he was in the wrong. You're putting in the effort. You need to be confident in the effort that you're putting forth,
Mm-hmm.
because whether or not you do the right or wrong thing, you can't expect him to tell you that
Yeah.
you're doing the right thing. You need to know. So
Yeah.
I apologize. I was like, I'll apologize on his behalf, because again, he shouldn't have responded in that way. That wasn't
Yeah.
appropriate, especially in this high stress environment. That's not going to help anybody. But
Yeah.
he's not somebody that's going to sit here and listen to me telling him that either. So I'm going to
Yeah.
tell her, because she'll listen, and then hopefully we can just set the precedent and let the other people around us watch how we operate, and they can keep up with us.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think people oftentimes don't or underestimate that power of like, the word that we kind of use is like a pivot reinforcement. It's like
Mm.
you address something off to the side of what you're really trying to address, like in hopes that that person
Yeah.
is observing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's very powerful because it's like a lot of people, they have developed a maladaptive behavior to get attention.
Yeah.
So if I want to address you, but I also don't want to show you that I'm giving you that attention, I'm going to address over here knowing you're listening.
Yeah.
And then once you have shown the appropriate, way to behave, now you have my attention.
Right. And people should not confuse that with being like petty, right? Because that
No.
can also often be petty.
Sure.
Like
Like the
say
cold
things like,
soldier, cold
yeah,
shoulder.
yeah, be like, oh, like don't worry about them. Like it's not
Yeah.
that. That's not what we're trying to
No.
promote here. But
Nope.
you got to pick and choose what battles you're gonna fight. Sometimes you got to elevate the little man and expect the big man to recognize that, and then they'll operate a little differently, because little
Mm-hmm.
man over here got more confidence now, and he's operating differently, and he doesn't seem shut down whenever he snaps at you anymore. So
Mm-hmm.
he's gonna kind of see the difference in your reaction, and maybe check himself and be like, oh, I'm not getting the response that I was previously. Like maybe I need to switch up the script a little bit if I expect people to do what I want them to do.
Yep. And that's it, man. Because like we've been saying, we want autonomy, we want freedom, we want love.
Mm-hmm.
You can get that the appropriate way. You don't have to choose these harsh ways to receive attention and love. Like someone will love you for your true self.
Yep. Someone will, as long as you love you for your true self.
100%.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a great full circle on the topic of relationships.
Yeah. We didn't talk about the high end of the spectrum, which is like intimate relationships, but I
Yeah.
think that that's appropriate for us to say for another day.
Okay. Well, what do you think? Like quickly, just what do you think about an intimate relationship and how it differs?
I could talk about it for a long time
Yeah,
because,
for sure.
me and Maddie, we've been together now for 7 years, I want to
Man,
say.
beautiful.
Been married for going on 3. And,
Mm,
I think we have a very strong relationship. We
yeah,
have open communication. We have respect for each other.
for sure.
We have gotten rid of our insecurities by talking about them and trying to understand ourselves and understand each other as much as possible, and both having this joint drive to grow together and grow individually, personally, professionally.
Yeah.
And we try to give each other freedom too,
Mm-hmm.
and we have trust in our relationship, not like sneaking around going through each other's phones,
Yeah, like genuine trust.
yeah, genuine
Yeah.
trust and genuine love. And we came from 2 very different childhoods and upbringings, and we've just been able to find the joy in learning about each other, and just the experiences that we've had. She's my best friend, and I feel like there's nothing that I do that I wouldn't want her there with me.
Man, that's such a beautiful place to be.
I don't take her golfing because I haven't gotten her lessons yet, but I would be cool if she was my caddy hanging out with me. Like, I don't want her to not be there.
For sure.
But really, anything I do, I would love for my wife to be there, just because she has the positive presence, and she's always very supportive. No matter what I do, she trusts me in my decisions, and she doesn't really question me very often. If she does question me, we talk about it. We make decisions together. I would say that I'm the quote unquote head of the household, but I still don't do things without running them by my wife.
That's huge.
Yeah.
And man, like we talk often about all these different ways that people are supposed to have like revolutionary mindsets and do these things to be able to move the ball forward and all these areas that we want. But that's the foundation, dude. Like having that family, that core unit that is together in true love. That's what I'm saying. Like that's just motivation for anyone.
Yeah, I hope so. But people shouldn't be discouraged if they don't have a relationship that emulates mine.
True.
And so I used to be hesitant to, be vocal or open about how good I think my relationship is, because I don't want it to seem like I'm bragging, but we put in the work just like with anything I succeed in. We worked on our relationship. Early on, we went quite a bit of time without ever having like any type of argument. And I was like, oh wow, this girl's perfect. Like, we're never gonna argue. Like, and then we had a small argument, and I was like, oh, I'm out. I can't do this.
You're like, dang it, we argued.
But we talked. Yeah, no, that was really how it was. It was so unrealistic for me to think that way. And then she was the one who told me. We talked about it, and she was like, we're gonna have arguments on it. We came to a conclusion afterwards that we are going to have disagreements.
Yeah.
But we don't need to have arguments.
100%.
So we were both right. We were just thinking about it in different ways, and we joined our perspectives, and we had an adult conversation about it. And that's something that has helped us to this day. Because it's healthy for us to disagree. That's the only way we're going to be honest with each other, right? If we never disagree, then somebody's lying. But, certain things we can come to an agreement. And some things you have to agree to disagree. And that's okay too. But that was a big eye opener for me, because I had never really been in that serious of a relationship, I guess. And it was very beneficial that she told me that that's how relationships are. Like,
for sure,
gonna have arguments.
That's so healthy. That's the power of two people who love themselves coming together.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes people are fighting an internal battle, haven't found love in themselves, and they're like, you know what, I'll get with somebody who gives me compliments, I'll get with somebody who lets me know I'm beautiful and tells me I'm smart. Now I don't really need to go inside and work on myself. And then that seems to be how things go south quick.
Yeah.
Because once we get in an argument and I'm not telling you you're beautiful and you're smart,
yeah,
you also don't have the self-confidence.
Well, and holding grudges,
all that.
Not having a discussion about what you argued about. Trying to bottle it up, act like it didn't happen. Like, that's not beneficial, right?
It's difficult.
Yeah.
It's very difficult.
It is.
But it's funny because all of these relationships make our lives better.
Oh, yeah.
All of them do. Like, this is the life enhancer, is the people around you. And if you lose sight of that, it can get dark. It can get very dark. I know people who have lost sight of that and think that, their own energy is what they're going to do to make it. And they find themselves in a lot of difficult situations.
Yeah. Yep. And again, we are the collective. We are part of one. All
Yeah, we
together,
are.
there's one love. And we consider ourselves leaders of the collective, but we're not better than anybody. We're all on the same level. I was again telling a kid that earlier today. He was nervous talking to the new varsity coach and stuff. I'm like, "Were you nervous? That's a plain dude." He's like, well, he's won these championships. Like he has these accolades. Like he's been coaching for this many years.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? And he's a human being like you. Like
100%.
the only difference between y'all is age.
Yeah,
like,
man.
You're gonna have just as many successes and accolades when you're as old as him. He should be able to respect you for your capabilities at your age and what you're here to do. You're here to be an athlete. Like he expects you to be a student athlete, and you do that well. So there's nothing for you to be nervous about.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
Talk to him, right?
It's a bunch of human beings.
Yeah.
Just like you, your coach wants to be loved. Your coach is looking for the autonomy, freedom that we're all trying to get.
Yeah. And I remember being a young nurse my first year, being afraid to talk to doctors. Like, I think every nurse goes through it. Like, you got to call them on the phone. You got to have like this script ready to go because they're ready to hang up the phone. You want to tell them all these things as quickly as possible. But, I show the utmost respect to my doctors, and I expect it in return. And that is reflected very quickly in almost all situations I have with almost any doctor. Sure. I will admit, when a doctor responds to me in a different way that is not like the other doctors, I'm taken back a little bit, but I still don't take it personally because we work in stressful environments, and you don't know what that person's going through. They could be having a stressful home life and coming into this stressful work environment.
Yeah.
And the doctors have a lot on their plate. So I let things slide. I try to be understanding and also explain to my colleagues how we have to be understanding of each other as well, but also put each other in the best situation possible by being understanding and trying not to respond in a negative manner to each other because it's such a high stress environment.
Yeah. Yeah, man. And it's so easy to do.
Yeah.
But when you have a greater goal, when you're working with a greater goal and a greater purpose, it seems as if we all should be able to put our ego aside.
Right.
But obviously in practice, we're human beings. We're beautiful creatures.
Yeah.
We can be egotistic, but we all want to be loved.
We all want to be loved, and you can be, and you should be. You deserve it.
100%.
Yeah. Cool. I think that's a wrap, y'all. Episode 3 in the books. Thank you once again for listening to R&B. Resident Blake, Rhythm and Blessings. We're coming back with more heat, so stay tuned. Leave comments. Please like, share. I hope you gained something from today. And again, I thank God for this opportunity.
Yes. Thank you, God, for this opportunity. We out. Peace.
Peace.